Chinedu Okoro stood frozen at his bedroom window, watching his housekeeper, Grace Adebayo, hurry down the front steps of his mansion with two black nylon bags clutched tightly in her hands. Something was wrong. The bags looked full, but she carried them like they contained secrets. "Grace, wait!" he called out from his second-floor balcony. She stopped so suddenly that one bag nearly slipped from her grip. When she looked up, her eyes were wide with surprise and something else he couldn't identify. Fear. Guilt? "Yes, sir. Did I forget something?" she asked, adjusting both bags behind her back. Chinedu walked downstairs and stepped into the evening air. The golden sun was setting over the busy streets of Victoria Island, but his attention was fixed entirely on Grace. She had been his housekeeper for 8 months, always quiet, always efficient. But lately, something had changed. "What's in those bags?" he asked directly, keeping his voice calm. Grace shifted her weight from one foot to the other. "Just some things I bought during my lunch break, sir." Nothing important. He studied her face. Grace was normally steady, composed. Now she looked nervous. "You've been leaving early a lot lately. Always saying it's your sick mother." "Yes, sir. Mama has been very unwell. I'm trying my best to care for her." Chinedu stepped closer. The bags looked heavy despite her efforts to hide them. "Yesterday I heard you on the phone speaking Igbo. You mentioned needing urgent money. A lot of money." Grace's fingers tightened on the bag handles. "Sir, I don't understand what you're asking me." "I'm not asking, Grace. I'm telling you, something is going on." The silence between them felt thick and uncomfortable. Grace had always been respectful, but now she lifted her chin with a defiance he had never seen before. "Sir, if you don't trust me, maybe you should find someone else to clean your house." Before he could respond, she turned and walked straight out of his compound gate. Her footsteps echoed on the pavement as she disappeared into the busy street. Chinedu stood alone in his massive compound, hands in his pockets, jaw tight with frustration. Inside his 5-bedroom mansion, the silence felt heavier than usual. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, but couldn't shake the feeling that Grace was hiding something important from him. He had learned to be careful. After building his tech company from nothing and becoming one of the youngest millionaires in the city, he had discovered that money brought more enemies than friends. Business partners had lied to him. Friends had stolen from him. Even family members had betrayed his trust for money. Now Grace, the quiet woman who cleaned his kitchen and watered his plants every day, might be doing the same thing. That night, Chinedu sat at his laptop staring at Grace's employee file. Grace Adebayo, 26 years old, originally from a village in Enugu State. She had worked for him for 8 months. Her references were good. Her identification was verified. But as he looked closer, he realized how little he actually knew about her life outside his house. Where did she go after work? What did she do on weekends? Who were her friends? The file was too clean, too simple, like someone had deliberately left out the important details. He remembered something from earlier that week. Grace had arrived at work, soaking wet from the rain. When she hung her jacket in the hallway, he had offered to help her. While moving the jacket, he felt something crinkle in the pocket. A receipt. Chinedu got up from his desk and walked to the coat rack near the kitchen. He reached into the same pocket. The receipt was still there, folded and slightly damp. He unfolded it carefully. It was a bank transfer slip. 200,000 naira sent to an account in Enugu. The name on the account was Grace Adebayo. His chest tightened. Her mother's name, perhaps. Was Grace telling the truth about her sick mother? Or was this receipt evidence of something else entirely? He placed the slip on his kitchen table and stared at it. 200,000 naira was a significant amount of money, more than Grace earned in 3 months working for him. Where had she gotten that kind of money? The questions multiplied in his mind. If her mother was truly sick, why hadn't Grace ever asked him for help? He was wealthy enough to solve most financial problems with a single phone call. But Grace had never mentioned money troubles. She had never asked for an advance on her salary or requested time off for family emergencies. She suffered in silence, working multiple jobs, sending money home, carrying those mysterious bags every evening. Tomorrow, he decided, he would ask her directly about the receipt. But something told him Grace would find a way to avoid giving him a straight answer. She was skilled at keeping her personal life private. The more Chinedu thought about Grace's behavior, the more concerned he became. She was just his housekeeper, someone he paid to clean and organize his home. But why did it feel like there was so much more to her story? Why did he care so much about what she was hiding? It was Friday evening, exactly 1 week after their confrontation about the bags. Grace had just finished mopping the marble floors in the dining room when she turned to Chinedu with her usual polite expression. "Sir, I'll be leaving now. My mother has a hospital appointment early tomorrow morning. I also have some personal matters to handle tonight." Chinedu nodded, keeping his face neutral. "Take care, Grace." But the moment she stepped out of his compound gate, he grabbed his car keys from the kitchen counter. Something inside him refused to let this mystery continue. Too many questions, too many gaps in her story. What kind of personal matters required her attention every single evening? 15 minutes later, Chinedu sat in his black SUV parked down the street from his own house. He had adjusted his seat lower so Grace wouldn't notice him if she looked back. His heart was beating faster than he expected. He felt like a detective following a suspect, which made him uncomfortable, but he needed answers. Grace walked quickly along the sidewalk, carrying a small bag over her shoulder. Her steps were purposeful, like someone who knew exactly where she was going. She didn't call a taxi or order a ride-sharing service. Instead, she walked to the main road and boarded a yellow Danfo bus heading toward Ajagunle. Chinedu frowned. Ajagunle was far from Victoria Island, and it wasn't a wealthy area. What business did Grace have there? He started his engine and followed the bus from a safe distance. The evening traffic was heavy, filled with honking cars, motorcycle riders weaving between vehicles, and street hawkers selling everything from phone chargers to roasted corn. But Chinedu's focus remained fixed on the yellow bus carrying Grace. After more than an hour of stop-and-go traffic, the bus finally stopped in a crowded neighborhood with narrow roads and old buildings. Chinedu watched Grace step down and walk past a row of shops with faded signs and peeling paint. She stopped in front of a small building that looked different from the others. It was cleaner, with fresh paint on the walls and a hand-painted sign above the entrance. Chinedu squinted to read it. Community Learning Center, Evening Classes and Adult Education. Grace pushed open the front door and disappeared inside. Chinedu parked his SUV across the street and waited. Through the large windows he could see inside the building. It was a simple classroom with plastic chairs arranged in rows, a blackboard at the front, and fluorescent lights hanging from the ceiling. And then he saw something that shocked him completely. Grace was standing at the front of the classroom, smiling as she spoke to a group of older men and women. She wasn't cleaning or serving, she was teaching. "Good evening, everyone," Grace said in clear English, pointing to words written on the blackboard. "Tonight we will practice introducing ourselves in English." The students, mostly adults who looked like they had finished long days of manual labor, repeated after her with thick accents but genuine enthusiasm. "My name is," Grace said slowly. "My name is," the class echoed back. Chinedu watched in stunned silence as Grace moved around the small classroom, helping individual students with pronunciation, kneeling beside an elderly woman who struggled with writing and patiently correcting mistakes with encouraging smiles. This was not the quiet, reserved housekeeper he knew. This Grace was animated, confident, and clearly loved by her students. She laughed with them, celebrated their small victories, and treated each person with respect and dignity. When the lesson ended, Grace opened her small bag and began distributing items to the students. Bread rolls, bottled water, and small packets of biscuits. The same kind of items she had been carrying in those suspicious black bags. Chinedu felt his chest tighten with a mixture of shame and amazement. The bags weren't filled with stolen goods. They contained food for people who probably couldn't afford proper meals. He sat in his car for another 30 minutes, watching Grace interact with her students as they prepared to leave. She hugged several of them goodbye, reminded others about homework assignments, and promised to bring more reading materials next week. As the building emptied and Grace began cleaning up the classroom, Chinedu started his engine and drove home in complete silence. Back in his mansion that night, he couldn't concentrate on anything. He kept thinking about what he had witnessed. Grace wasn't hiding criminal activity. She was dedicating her evenings to helping people who had been forgotten by society. He opened his laptop and searched for information about the Community Learning Center. The website was basic and poorly designed, but the mission statement was clear: providing free English and literacy classes to adults who never had the opportunity to complete their education. There were photos of students and volunteers, and in almost every image, he could see Grace, teaching, serving food, celebrating graduations, and always smiling in a way he had never seen at his house. One page described the center's financial struggles. They were 3 months behind on rent. The roof leaked during rainy season. They desperately needed funding for books, supplies, and basic repairs. At the bottom of the page was a small note: "This center operates entirely through volunteer efforts and small donations. Our teachers work without pay because they believe education can change lives." Chinedu leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of his accusations and suspicions. Grace had been leaving his house every evening not to rest or enjoy herself, but to give her time and energy to people who had nothing. She used her own money to buy them food. She taught them skills that might help them find better jobs or simply feel more confident in the city, and he had suspected her of stealing from him. The shame hit him like a physical blow. He had built walls around himself for so long that he couldn't recognize genuine goodness when it was right in front of him. But now he knew the truth, and he had to decide what to do with this knowledge. The next morning, Grace arrived at work earlier than usual. Chinedu was already awake, sitting in his kitchen with a cup of coffee, waiting for her. He had barely slept after what he had witnessed the night before. "Good morning, sir," Grace said quietly as she hung her jacket on the rack and tied her apron around her waist. "Grace, could you sit down for a moment? I need to talk to you." She paused, clearly surprised. In 8 months of working for him, Chinedu had never asked her to sit and talk. She wiped her hands nervously on her apron and sat on the edge of a kitchen chair. "I know about the Community Learning Center," Chinedu said directly. Grace's face went completely pale. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the edge of the chair. "Sir, I don't know what you mean." "I followed you last night," he admitted, feeling ashamed but knowing he had to tell her the truth. "I saw you teaching those people. I saw you giving them food from your own bag." Grace's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. Chinedu continued, his voice softer now. "I've been suspicious of you for weeks. I thought you were hiding something bad from me. I thought maybe you were stealing or lying about your sick mother." "You followed me," Grace whispered, more to herself than to him. "Yes, and I was wrong about everything." He leaned forward in his chair. "Grace, I saw you teaching those adults how to read and write. I saw you feeding people who probably hadn't eaten all day. I saw you smile and laugh in a way you never do here in my house." Grace wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I wasn't trying to hide it from you, sir. I just didn't think it was important to mention." "It's the most important thing you could have told me," Chinedu said firmly. "Do you know what I did last night after I got home? I researched your center. I read about the financial problems, the leaking roof, the unpaid teachers." Grace looked down at her hands. "I also learned that you work 3 different jobs," he continued. "You clean my house 5 days a week, you work weekends at a supermarket, and you teach at that center every evening without getting paid." "Those people need help," Grace said quietly. "Most of them came to the city from villages, looking for better opportunities. But they can't find good jobs because they don't speak English well. They're not stupid, sir. They're farmers, mechanics, tailors, skilled people. They just need someone to believe in them." Chinedu felt something shift inside his chest as he listened to her speak. "And you use your own salary to buy them food? Sometimes. When I can afford it." Grace's voice was barely above a whisper. "I grew up in a village too. My parents sold everything they owned to send me to secondary school in the city. I know what it feels like to be looked down on because of how you speak or where you come from." "Grace," Chinedu said, standing up from his chair, "you've been giving more to your community than most people who earn 10 times your salary." She looked up at him, confused by the change in his tone. "I want to help," he said simply. "Help with what, sir?" "The center. The rent, the repairs, the supplies. Everything." Grace stood up quickly, shaking her head. "No, sir. I can't accept charity from you. Those people trust me because I'm one of them. If they know I'm taking money from my wealthy employer, they'll think I'm trying to show off or that I'm better than them. It doesn't have to come from me directly, Chinedu said. It can be anonymous. No, Grace said more firmly. I appreciate your offer, but this is something we need to handle ourselves. We're proud people, sir. Poor but proud. Chinedu was quiet for a moment, studying her face. He could see the determination in her eyes, the same strength that allowed her to work 3 jobs while still finding energy to teach others. Then let me ask you something else, he said. What if I offered you a different job? A position where you could help even more people, with better resources and a proper salary. Grace tilted her head, curious but cautious. I run a foundation for education and community development. I want to create a program specifically for adult literacy and job training. I need someone to lead it, someone who understands the community and has experience working with people who've been overlooked by society. Grace's eyes widened. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a chance to expand what you're already doing. Instead of helping 20 people in one classroom, you could help hundreds across the city. Grace was silent for a long time, processing what he had said. What would happen to the people at my center? She finally asked. They would be part of the program. We'd renovate their building, provide proper materials, and hire more teachers. But you'd be the director, making sure everything stays true to your vision. Grace sat back down, overwhelmed by the possibilities and the implications. I need time to think about this, she said. Of course. Take all the time you need. But as Grace stood up to continue her work, Chinedu could see the conflict in her expression. She wanted to help more people, but she was afraid of losing the personal connection she had with her current students. Over the following days, their relationship changed completely. The suspicion was gone, replaced by mutual respect and something deeper that neither of them was ready to name. They talked during her lunch breaks about education, poverty, and the barriers that kept good people trapped in bad situations. Chinedu shared stories about building his business and the loneliness that came with success. Grace spoke about her dreams of creating a school where adults could learn without shame or judgment, but she still hadn't given him an answer about the job offer. And then, one Friday afternoon, everything fell apart. Grace knocked on his study door with an envelope in her hand. Her face was sad but determined. Sir, I've made my decision about your offer. Chinedu looked up from his laptop, hoping to see excitement in her eyes. Instead, he saw goodbye. I can't accept your offer, Grace said, placing the envelope on Chinedu's desk. I'm giving my 2 weeks' notice. Chinedu felt his heart sink. You're quitting? Yes, sir. I've decided to focus entirely on the Learning Center. We received some donations recently, and I want to use that time to expand our programs. He stared at her, trying to understand. Grace, you could help so many more people through my foundation. Why are you walking away from this opportunity? She took a deep breath. Because I'm afraid of losing who I am. Those people at the center, they trust me because I'm like them. I work multiple jobs. I struggle to pay bills. I understand their problems. If I take a high-paying job with your foundation, I become someone different. Someone they might not trust anymore. That's not true, Chinedu said, standing up from his chair. You'd still be the same person. Would I? Grace's voice was quiet but firm. When I started volunteering at that center, it was because I had nowhere else to go. I was lonely in this big city, missing my village, working for people who barely noticed I existed. Teaching those adults gave me purpose. It made me feel valuable. Chinedu felt a sting at her words. He had barely noticed she existed until he became suspicious of her. Your offer is generous, Grace continued. But I can't risk becoming someone who helps people from a distance, writing reports and attending meetings instead of sitting face-to-face with students who need encouragement. So you'd rather struggle financially than accept help that could multiply your impact. I'd rather stay true to my mission than compromise it for comfort. The silence between them was heavy. Chinedu realized that Grace's decision wasn't just about the job offer. It was about maintaining her identity and her connection to the community she served. When will you finish working here? He asked. In 2 weeks. I'll make sure everything is organized for whoever replaces me. After Grace left his study, Chinedu sat alone, staring at the resignation letter. For the first time in years, he had met someone whose character impressed him more than their ambition. Grace was choosing principle over profit, community over career advancement. But losing her felt like losing something he hadn't realized he needed. Over the next 2 weeks, Chinedu found himself paying attention to Grace in ways he never had before. He noticed how she hummed softly while arranging flowers in the dining room. He watched her water the plants on his balcony with careful attention to each one. He observed the gentle way she folded his laundry, as if she cared about details that most people would rush through. He also noticed how she avoided personal conversations with him now. Their brief moment of connection after he discovered her secret had been replaced by polite professional distance. On her last Thursday, Chinedu knocked on Grace's bedroom door in the evening. She opened it, surprised to see him standing there with a manila envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "Recommendation letters, for whatever you do next." She opened the envelope and read the first letter. Her eyes widened as she saw the detailed descriptions of her work ethic, her character, and her commitment to helping others. "These are incredibly detailed," she said, looking up at him with surprise. "I've been watching you work for 8 months. I know exactly what kind of person you are." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll stay in touch. Let me know how the center is doing." "I will," she promised. "And Grace," he paused, "if you ever change your mind about expanding your work, my offer will always be open." She nodded, too emotional to speak. The next day was Grace's last day of work. She cleaned the house with the same thorough attention she had always shown, organized his papers, and left detailed instructions for her replacement. When evening came, she stood at the front door with her personal belongings in a small bag. "Thank you for everything, sir," she said formally. "Thank you for showing me what real service looks like," Chinedu replied. After she left, the mansion felt emptier than it ever had before. Chinedu realized that Grace had brought something to his house that money couldn't buy: purpose, warmth, and the reminder that wealth meant nothing if it wasn't used to help others. 3 months passed. Chinedu threw himself into work, expanding his business and making more money than ever before. But the satisfaction he expected never came. His new housekeeper was efficient but distant. His house was clean but felt lifeless. He often found himself wondering what Grace was doing at the learning center. Had the anonymous donations he had secretly arranged helped them expand their programs? Were her students making progress with their English lessons? Then one morning his assistant David walked into his office with a gold-embossed envelope. "This came for you personally, sir." "It looks like an invitation." Chinedu opened it and read, "You are cordially invited to the Community Learning Center's first annual graduation ceremony, honoring our students and volunteers who have made exceptional contributions to adult education in our community." At the bottom of the invitation, in smaller print, he saw, "Special Recognition Ceremony for Miss Grace Adebayo, Volunteer Teacher of the Year." His hands trembled slightly as he held the card. The Community Learning Center had been completely transformed. Colorful banners hung from the ceiling, round tables were covered with white cloths, and the smell of jollof rice and fried plantains filled the air. Students, families, and volunteers filled every chair, speaking in multiple languages and celebrating together. Chinedu stood near the back of the room in his dark suit, feeling slightly out of place among the crowd of working-class families. He hadn't been sure whether to come, but something had compelled him to witness Grace's moment of recognition. When he spotted her across the room, his breath caught. Grace moved between the tables with confidence he had never seen before. She wore a simple blue dress and her hair was styled elegantly. She was laughing with students, hugging their family members, and accepting congratulations with genuine joy. She looked free in a way she never had in his mansion. The ceremony began with speeches from community leaders and presentations of certificates to students who had completed various programs. Chinedu watched elderly men and women walk across the small stage to receive recognition for learning to read and write. Many of them cried with pride as they held their certificates. Finally, the MC called Grace's name. "Please join me in recognizing Miss Grace Adebayo, whose dedication to our adult learners has transformed countless lives over the past year." Grace walked to the front of the room as everyone stood and applauded. When she reached the microphone, she smiled and waited for the noise to settle. "Thank you all," she said, her voice clear and strong. "A year ago, I was working 3 jobs and feeling lost in this big city. I started volunteering here because I needed purpose as much as our students needed education. What I found was a family." She looked out at the crowd, her eyes scanning the faces of students she had taught. "Education gave me confidence when I was young, and I wanted to pass that gift to others. But these students taught me something more valuable. They taught me that everyone has wisdom to share, regardless of how many years they spent in school." The audience murmured agreement. "This center operates because of small donations and big hearts. Someone recently made an anonymous contribution that saved us from closing." Grace's voice became emotional. "I don't know who that person is, but if they're listening, thank you for believing in what we're doing here." Chinedu felt his chest tighten. After Grace left his employment, he had quietly arranged for substantial donations to reach the center through a local foundation. New roof repairs, updated classroom equipment, and enough funding to pay stipends to volunteer teachers. As Grace accepted her award and posed for pictures with students, Chinedu realized he needed to leave. Seeing her happiness confirmed that she had made the right choice in rejecting his job offer. She belonged here, with these people who loved and respected her. But as he turned toward the exit, he heard someone call his name. "Mr. Chinedu?" He turned to see Grace walking toward him, her award in her hands and surprise on her face. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said. "I wanted to congratulate you on your recognition. You deserve it." They stood looking at each other in the crowded room, both aware that their brief working relationship had evolved into something more complex. "Grace," Chinedu said quietly, "there's something I need to tell you." She tilted her head, curious. "The anonymous donations to your center, that was me." Grace's eyes widened and she took a step back. "I know you said you didn't want charity," he continued quickly, "but after I saw what you were building here, I couldn't just walk away. You were trying to help so many people with so few resources. You've been supporting us this whole time," Grace whispered. "I made the donations through a foundation, completely anonymously. No strings attached, no recognition expected. I just wanted to help." Grace stared at him, processing this revelation. "The roof repairs, the new computers, the funding for teacher stipends. That was all you. I saw what you sacrificed to keep this place running. I saw you using your own salary to feed students. I couldn't let financial problems destroy what you had built." Tears filled Grace's eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you made it clear that you needed to do this independently. I respected that, but I also couldn't stand by and watch you struggle when I had the resources to help." Grace looked down at her award, then back at Chinedu. "I don't know how to feel about this," she said honestly. "You don't have to feel anything except proud of what you've accomplished. This center's success is because of your vision and your work, not my money. But your money made it possible for us to expand, to help more people, and your heart made it meaningful." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the celebration continue around them. "Chinedu," Grace said softly, "I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For assuming that accepting help from you would compromise my integrity. You found a way to support our mission without interfering with it. That takes wisdom and respect." He smiled. "You taught me that real wealth isn't what you accumulate. It's what you give away to make other people's lives better." Grace looked at him with new understanding. "Would you like to stay for dinner? I'd love for you to meet some of our students properly." "I'd be honored." As they walked back toward the celebration, Grace turned to him one more time. "That job offer you made, is it still available?" Chinedu stopped walking. "Are you reconsidering?" "I'm thinking we might be able to find a way to expand this work without losing its heart, but only if you're willing to be a true partner, not just a financial backer." "What do you mean?" Grace smiled, and for the first time since he had known her, it was the same confident, joyful expression he had seen her wear while teaching. "I mean, are you ready to get your hands dirty helping real people solve real problems? Because that's the only way this partnership works." Chinedu extended his hand to shake hers. "I'm ready to learn from the best teacher I know." As they shook hands, both of them knew this was the beginning of something much bigger than either of them had imagined. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like, and comment at the comment section below.